Hey guys, welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study, a plain and simple book by book, chapter by chapter, verse by verse study through the entire Bible. Currently, we are in Second Chronicles, chapter 25. This is an interesting story. Now, I know I say that a lot because actually I mean it a lot. But this story is about a king who, for the most part, is a good king, but doesn't follow God with his whole heart. He makes a bad choice. Spends money. God tell him don't go through with it. He said, but what about the money I spent? He said, God is able to give you a lot more. In this particular case, he followed the advice. And I think a lot of times one of our takeaways from this story is going to be sometimes we have to cut our losses for our greater good. Okay? Okay, so let's get into it. Second Chronicles chapter 25. Amaziah became king when he was 25 years old, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Jehoiadan. She was from Jerusalem. He did what was right in the Lord's sight, but not wholeheartedly. So that's kind of an interesting take on him. You know, as we've been moving through, we've seen titles: a good king, follow God wholehearted; wicked king. But he said this guy is kind of half and half here. I said as soon as the kingdom was firmly in his grasp, he executed his servants who had murdered his father the king. Now that would have been Joash. You remember, and Joash turned out to be a good king who turned his heart after his mentor died. He said, but he did not. He said, however, he did not put the children to death because, as is written in the law, in the book of Moses, where the Lord commanded, father must not die because of the children, and the children must not die because of the father, but each will die for his own sin. So you were never to punish children for something their father did. Now, when you read through the Old Testament, you may think there are many contradictions to this. Let me just say that, for example, in First Chronicles, I think it was chapter 29, where you remember David, all of a sudden the country has a famine, and it's a severe famine going on like 3 years. He says, so he finally goes to God, Lord, what's going on? The Lord says, well, this sin is because of what Saul did. And the way that David made it right was he offered up some of Saul's sons. So even in that story, there are kind of levels there that look like it's certainly contradictory. One, why is David being punished for something Saul did, right? His generation. And two, the way that David rectified was offered up Saul's sons or descendants, okay? I believe it's descendants. So doesn't that contradict this? Now, really the answer to that is no, and this is why. We have to, when you read the Bible sometimes, and remember I kind of, in the last a couple of chapters ago, I pointed out where the focus of the narrative, for example, in this case, is on the king. But every now and then we kind of get a glimpse into what was going on in society. So, for example, remember, I believe it was during Joash, doing the righteous king. He would tell the people, throw away your idols. Well, the question is, why did they have idols in the first place? But he would tell them to, in each generation, remember, almost these good kings in each generation of the good kings, he's telling them, throw away your idols. And the people would throw away their idols and pledge to God again. Now, the reason why I bring that up is because we don't always get that in the narrative. So when God is judging, and it looks like God is being unfair, always remember we don't always have all the information. So, um, but yet, when it comes to very specific crimes, this is what he's referring to right here. Now, for example, you take Athaliah, who killed all of the king's sons. She violated this to the utmost. All right, verse 5. Then Amaziah gathered Judah and Amaziah. Let me say this right. Amaziah, still butchered it, sorry. Then Amaziah gathered Judah and assembled them according to ancestral house, according to commanders of thousands, according to commanders of hundreds. He numbered those 20 years old or more for all Judah and Benjamin. He found there to be 300,000 choice men who could serve in the army, bearing spears and shields. Then, for 7,500 pounds of silver, he hired 100,000 brave warriors from Israel. Now listen to this. However, a man of God came to him and says, King, do not let Israel's army go with you, for the Lord is not with Israel, all the Ephraimites. Now, if you kind of go back and you think about Jehoshaphat, how he allied with wicked Ahab. This is not the case, but again, you kind of get an example here where he allied with the wicked. Now, he comes up with this large sums of silver, and he gives it to the Israelites. He says, I'm hiring you, and now the man of God says to him, don't do it. Verse 8, he says, but if you go with them, do it. Be strong for battle, but God will make you stumble before the enemy. For God has the power to help or to make one stumble. In other words, if you go with him, you're going to fail. Then Amaziah said to the man of God, what should I do about the 7,500 pounds of silver I gave to the Israel division? In other words, I gave them money up front. I paid them. The man of God replied, the Lord is able to give you much more than this. In other words, and this is right here becomes a key thing right here to follow. In this case, dude, you made a bad choice. You spent money. Cut your losses. Okay, and that's basically what the prophet is telling him. The greater takeaway from this would be, the Lord is able to give you much more than this. Yeah, you made a mistake, but God is able to cause you to recover. The biggest thing is follow God. Follow God's wisdom. Follow God's commands. So, Amaziah released the division that came to him from Ephraim to go home. But they got very angry with Judah and returned home in a fierce rage. I don't know why. They got paid. In fact, they got paid for really doing nothing. Verse 11. Amaziah strengthened his position and led his people to the valley of Salt. He struck down 10,000 Syrites, and the Judahites captured 10,000 alive. They took them to the top of the cliff where they threw them off, and all of them were dashed into pieces. In other words, they may just kind of fall off of the cliff there. Horrible death, too, by the way. As for the men of the division that Amaziah sent back so they would not go with him into battle, they raided the cities of Judah from Samaria to Beth Horon, struck down 3,000 of their people, and took a great deal of plunder. So I don't know why they did that particularly. After Amaziah came from attack of the Edomites, he bought the gods. Now this is bad here. He bought the gods of the Serites, and set them up as his gods. He worshipped them and burned incense to them. So the Lord's anger burned against Amaziah, and he sent a prophet to him who said, why have you sought the people's gods that could not deliver their own people from your hand. Now, if you stop and think about the logic of this here, when we get into some of the writings of the prophets, we're going to see some of the same logic expounded. I mean, if in other words, here he says, you defeat this people, take their idols. And remember, idols were carved images. Some made out of wood, some made out of molten metal or whatever. But they were made man-made. God rebukes him in a sense and says, look, idiot, that God could not deliver his own people, and here you are worshiping it. It is hard for me, and I think it's hard for us to understand idolatry as it is today. And believe it or not, it still exists around the world. I'll give you an example that's going to maybe shock a lot of people. In India today, there are over 300 million gods that they worship. Think about that, And no doubt there are people that would say, as Christians, they put us in the same boat. But it's just amazing, the idolatry there, and especially during this day. Verse 16, while he was still speaking to him, the king asked, have we made you king, the king's counselor? Stop. Why should you lose your life? So now he gets arrogant. The prophet was, in a sense, the king's counselor. The prophet was the spiritual guide, as it were. So the prophet stopped, but he said, I know that God intends to destroy you, but you have done this and not listened to my advice. King Amaziah, I'm bugged by this now that I'm not pronouncing this simple name, you all. Hold on one second here.
Amaziah.
Amaziah. Okay. All right. Love these little tools here. I'll do a quick word pronunciation. Amaziah. So King Amaziah King Amaziah of Judah took counsel and sent word to Jehoash, son of Jehoaz, son of Jehu, king of Israel, saying, come, let us meet face to face. King Jehoaz of Israel sent word to King Amaziah of Judah, saying, Amaziah of Judah, saying, the thistle that was in Lebanon sent message to the clear, to the cedar that was in Lebanon, saying, give your daughter to my son as a wife. Then the wild animal that was in Lebanon passed by and trampled the thistle. You have said, look, I have defeated Edom, and you have become overconfident that you will get glory. Now stay home. Why stir up such trouble that you will fall, and Judah with you? But Amaziah wouldn't listen, for this turn of events was from God in order to hand him over to their enemies, because he went after the gods of Edom. So King Jehoshaphat of Israel advanced, and the king Amaziah and Judah faced off at Beth-shemesh in Judah. And Judah was routed before Israel, and each fled to his own tent. King Jehoash King Jehoaz of Israel captured Judah. King Amaziah, son of Joash, son of Joaz, at Beth-shemesh. Then Jehoash took him to Jerusalem and broke down 200 yards of Jerusalem wall, from Ephraim's gate to the corner gate. He took all the gold, silver, all the utensils that were found in Obed-Edom in God's temple, and the treasures of the king's palace and houses. Then he returned to Samaria. Okay. Judah's king Amaziah, son of Joash, lived 15 years after the death of the Judah's king Amaziah, son of Joash, lived 15 years after the death of Israel's king Jehoaz, son of Jehoahaz, The rest of the events of Amaziah's reign, from beginning to end, are written in the book of the kings of Judah and Israel. And from that time, Amaziah turned from following the Lord. A conspiracy was formed against him in Jerusalem, and he fled to Lachish. However, men were sent after him to Lachish, and they put him to death there. And they carried him back on the horses and buried him with his fathers in the city of Judah. Now, this is a tragic turn of events here, especially since, again, the prophet came. The prophets came to warn him, and it's amazing. Remember, at the beginning, he actually listened, and he would have had great victory had he continued, but he turned his heart. It's amazing. It is amazing. Don't forget to like and share this video, guys. And if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comment section below. Remember, all comments are welcome. And hit that subscribe button. I'll see you in the next study.